and welcome. This is Yasir Khan, and in this video I will be talking about the top reasons why you should not have a job. Now, before we get into the video, I would like you to know that my views are biased because for the last 10-11 years I've been an entrepreneur. I have multiple businesses and I've never had a job in my entire life, with the exception of 3 days back in 2006 when I was working at a pizza joint in York University. Okay, I worked there for only 3 days, and after the 3 days, the business owner let me go because he did not think I was doing a good enough job. Because frankly, I wasn't interested, and I didn't take ownership of the work that I was doing there. It was mundane work. It was just basically a grind, and frankly, I didn't care too much about it. So anyway, he let me go, and I was a little upset, to be honest, but that was the best thing that ever happened to me. After that episode, I promised myself I would never have a job, and here I am 13 years later, owning multiple businesses. So I'm pretty confident when I say that I'm happy with where I am in life, and if I had a job all these years, I probably wouldn't have enjoyed doing it as much as I enjoy running my own businesses. Once again, though, my views are my own. They could be biased, but I just wanted to kind of explain in this video how running your own business is different from having a job and the pros and cons to each. Okay, so let's get right into it. The first thing to understand is that whenever you have a job, you're exchanging time for money. Okay, this is always the case. As far as I know, there are almost no exceptions to that case, right? So the issue here is that, first of all, it caps your potential, your earning potential, because there are only so many hours in a day. And secondly, when you have a job, when you say okay to getting paid a certain number of dollars or rupees or whatever it is per hour or per day, it also limits your potential, because in your mind, this is how much you are worth, right? So said another way, you wouldn't be doing that job if you did not think that you were worth whatever the employer is paying you. I hope that makes sense, right? So that's why people who are doing a certain kind of job, they start thinking along the lines of how many hours would I have to work in order to afford this and this and this and this. And it always ends up turning into this vicious cycle, which spirals out of control, because once again, you have only so many hours in a day, and if your affordability is related to how many hours you can work, that's kind of an issue in at least in my mind, right? So once again, please understand that at a job, you're always exchanging time for money. This might be something you would be okay with, but it also might not be something you'd be okay with. Personally, I don't like limiting myself, and I do not like it when someone can come up to me and say that if you work 2 hours or 1 hour, I will pay you this much because this is what you're worth. This, to me, is putting a cap on my potential, and I just don't like it, right? The second thing to understand is that if you have a job and if you are getting paid well, which means that in Canada and the US, you're making 6 figures, you are also paying a lot in taxes, because there aren't a whole lot of ways where you can save on taxes if you are a high income earner. Okay? As a business owner, it is totally different, especially in these countries, in the Western countries. But as an employee, a high paid employee, you have to pay a lot in taxes. Now, statistically, if you're getting paid around $150,000 every year at your job, around 37 to 48% of that goes directly to federal and local governments, right? And that's the reason why most people who are doing these really prestigious and high-paying jobs are, they're not getting ahead financially. Because saying it another way, if you are highly paid at a job, you would be working 4 to 5 months every single year for the government, because the government taxes you and you have no choice but to pay the taxes. Now, as a business owner, this is totally different. You could make a lot more, but since you own a corporation, you can get taxed the way you want to, within reason, of course, but it does end up with you paying a lot less in taxes if you know what you're doing. Now, I don't mean to sound too technical, but all you have to understand is that if you have a job, first of all, you're exchanging time for money, and if you have a well-paying, high-paying job, then you're paying a lot in taxes, which kind of defeats the purpose of making a lot of money. The third thing to understand why you should not ideally have a job is that your employer will always pay you 1/5 or 1/10 what you are worth or what your productivity level is. So let's give you an example. Let's assume that someone hires you for $100,000 a year, okay, which is a very decent salary in Canada and the US. The issue is that if they pay you so much, they will make sure that your output is at least $500,000 a year. For most jobs, it is around $800,000 to $1 million a year. So it's said another way, someone who's paying you $10 an hour wants to make sure that your output is $50 an hour or $80 or $100 an hour, because that's the only reason they would hire you, right? If you're making more money for them, then it justifies the employer paying you is then justified, because then they can make more money off of you. There is not a single instance where someone would pay you, unless it's a government job. That's a separate issue. But a private company, big or small, it doesn't really matter. They will not pay you $50 an hour if your output is only $25 an hour. Okay? What I'm trying to say is that when you work a job, you are working to fulfill someone else's dream, right? You're building someone else's empire. You're fulfilling their dream. You're working towards their dream. And if you really look at the numbers, you will see that for most of the jobs out there, with taxes and with all of this included, they don't really make a lot of money, okay? And they're also working very hard to achieve success for someone else, and that is something I personally don't agree with. You might be okay with it because, we're all different, but this is one of the reasons why I really stay away from having a job, because then I have to cater to the boss. I have to do what he or she says instead of doing whatever I want to, right? And then my income is also capped. And everything, the fourth thing to understand is that if you have a job, even if you increase your output and productivity by a huge margin, most cookie cutter jobs will not appreciate that, because they have standardized processes, and it doesn't matter if you're in the top 1%. They will still pay you a little over your peers, just a little bit, even if you're the best of the best. Okay? I'm pretty sure you can think of a lot of examples where you can relate to this personally. So, with a job, you're taxed more, generally speaking. You don't have a lot of autonomy. You're doing what your boss is telling you to. You're building someone else's dream, and you are also stressed out. Now, this might not be the case, but I know a lot of people who have jobs, and for the most part, they're stressed out. I know people who are earning over $220,000 a year because they're doctors, or they're senior engineers, or they're really competent. But the problem is that if they lost their job right now, within 3 to 4 months, they would have to file bankruptcy, or they would have to dramatically lower their standard of living. And this happens because while they're getting a hefty check every 2 weeks from their job, most of it, well, not most of it, but at least 40 to 48% of it goes back to taxes, and people don't realize this. So whenever someone comes to you and they say, well, I make over $200,000 a year, ask them if they have a job. And if they say yes, the truth is that they're not making $200,000 a year. They're making $120,000 a year because of taxes. The rest is tax. And a lot of people don't understand that. And I'm just talking about the employment taxes, right? The income taxes. I'm not even talking about the sales tax or these third-party carbon taxes and fuel taxes. It all adds up. a general rule of thumb is that if you have a job, your actual income is half of it, because you're taking out taxes, you're taking out other third-party taxes, and trust me, there are a lot of taxes. And by the way, I'm just this video is generally for people who are in Canada and the US, but even for people around the world, they probably have similar tax rates. In Canada, the taxes are higher. In the US, they're pretty similar. And that's why I use these examples, because I can personally relate to them. And I've been living in Canada for the last 12 to 13 years. But generally, it is the case across the board. Okay, so please understand that getting degrees is good. Pursuing higher education is really good. I mean, I've done that myself as well. But there is a thing which limits you when you have a job. Okay, generally speaking, when you're doing a job, when you're employed, as opposed to owning your own corporation, when you're employed, you are playing someone else's game, and jobs are designed to strip out creativity from you. Okay, your employer does not, for the most part, does not care about your creativity. All he or she cares about is your output. And that mostly means following a very standardized process and just doing whatever everyone else is doing. And this is something I just don't agree with. You might agree to it, that's totally fine. But once again, I just thought I should make a video about it, because I keep getting these questions from people who want to start their own thing, but they say that, well, I'm working 9 to 7, not even 9 to 5, 9 to 7 every single day, 6 days a week, and then I don't have time to start my own business. And I get it. By the time you come home from a job, you're so tired, and you just want to relax and go to bed. So it's very difficult to start your own thing if you have a job which takes most, if not all, of your day, right? That said, you can still start your own thing. It might take a little longer than you anticipated, but if my rule is that if something is really important to me, I will do it. And that should be your thing as well. If something is really bothering you, then you should change it. If you're happy at your job, then by all means, more power to you, stay at the job. But if you would like to do something different, if you think of yourself as someone who would be successful running a business, then you should at least give it a shot. But giving it a shot does not mean trying it for 1 or 2 months and then giving up, because it doesn't work this way. It'll take anywhere between 1 to 2 or 3 years to get anything off the ground, especially if you have a full-time job. All right. So once again, please understand that there is no right or wrong thing to do here. These are just my opinions. My job is just to mention what I personally think is the right way to go about it. I just think that most people are accustomed to jobs, and it stifles their creativity, and they're worth a lot more if they ventured out on their own as opposed to having a job, right? My views are biased because I worked only 3 days at a job, but I have my own businesses for the last 10 to 12 years. So I hope this video gave you a little bit of insight. If you have any questions or comments, I'm getting the feeling that this video is going to get some serious comments, because I'm going against the grain here. Most people are, they do jobs, they're employees, so they would have a different point of view, and I entertain all kinds of points of view. If you have any comments, do let me know. I'd like to learn from you. I'd like to hear out what you think and where you are coming from. But as always, if this video has given you any insight at all, please like and share it. And this kind of encourages me to make more videos. And I plan to make 2 videos every single week. And I'll see you in another couple of days. Thank you so much. Take care.